Guys, it's Kevin, and this is my review for The Flash Season 1, Episode 17, Tricksters, and oh my god, this episode was amazing, and honestly, it kind of felt different from the rest of the series. It really felt like a very different type of episode, and it might just because the flashbacks that were in this and things like that, it all felt very different than usual, and I love that about it. I love how different it felt, and we got so many great reveals in this episode. Finally, we got all the reveals we've been wanting, and I absolutely love that about this episode. So let's just get into it because it was amazing. So we start with the Flash. He emerges from a wormhole and speeds to the Allen home. The Reverse Flash emerges a second later, and the two of them run to the house. And at the Allen home, Nora is taking a sip of wine when the wine flies out of her glass and into the air. The two speedsters run to the house and battle at super speed. A young Barry comes in, sees his mother caught between them, and we basically saw how she was murdered, which I thought was the perfect way to start the episode, was to see how that happened, and I thought that was amazingly well done. I really love that. So at the police lab, Barry brings up a board on Wells for Joe, of course, because they are now investigating about Wells, and he admits they don't know much about him, and Joe figures that Wells has something to do with Barry obtaining his powers, which is true. They don't know too much about Wells. They don't really know who he is. All they know is that he works with Barry, and he created particle accelerators. That's really all we know, which is one of the great things about this episode. We find out a lot more about Wells and who he was, and or more so, Eobard Thawne. We find out more of who he was as well, which I thought was great. I love that we found out more about him. So basically, Joe points out that the blood they found in the house doesn't match Wells, and he figures that Wells has been waiting for 15 years, and they just have to be as patient. And I thought that was really interesting when he said that, and they're starting to figure out what's going on, but they don't know what's going on. So at a city park, small parachutes drift down from the sky. The children and their parents stare up at them. When they hit ground, they explode, and Barry and Joe hear the explosions. Barry runs to the park. One child, Henry, is catching a parachute when the Flash arrives, whisks him away just in time. Atop the building, a masked figure records a video of himself, and later at Star Labs, Joe and Barry watch the video. And the figure describes himself as the Trickster and promises disorder. And Joe explains that, and I thought it was really funny that Cisco was upset that the Trickster already had named himself. I thought that was really funny because we always are looking forward to Cisco naming the metahumans, but this one's already named itself, so I thought that was really funny. So Joe explains that a Trickster launched a series of terrorist attacks 20 years ago, and the original Trickster, James Jesse, is serving several life sentences in Iron Heights, and Joe says that they'll talk to him and see if he can give them anything that might lead them to the new Trickster. And once Barry leaves, Wells points out that Barry's acting crazy, but Joe dismisses it as nothing. Of course, Barry definitely is feeling very uncomfortable around Wells, and that definitely shows in this episode. I mean, Barry now is watching Wells a lot more carefully. He is being a lot more careful what he says to Wells with what Wells says to him, and I love that. It really shows that Barry's not stupid. He knows what Wells is saying to him, and I love seeing that. So then we go back to 15 years ago when the Flash gets the young Barry out of the house, and the Reverse Flash starts to go after him, but his speed suddenly stops, and he contacts Gideon, and he warns that his time jump through time drained his powers, and the computer warns that he has no way back, and Eobard screams in frustration, ripping off his mask, and it just shows, I mean, it's something that we need to see. We needed to see how Barry's mom was murdered and what happened there, and I was very happy that we finally saw that. After 16 episodes, we finally saw that, and I love that. So at Iron Heights, basically, so I forgot that. Okay, at the police lab, Barry brings up a board on Wells for Joe, but admits they don't know much about him. Oh, I already read this. So basically, that's what happened there. So basically, then at Iron Heights, the warden takes Joe and Barry to a special cell deep within the prison. He gives them Twizzlers, and they go inside, and James smiles and welcomes them. And James was played by Mark Hamill, a.k.a. Luke Skywalker, and it was awesome to see him in this show. I know he's done a lot of animated superhero shows before, but this was his first regular superhero show, and it's really cool. He honestly is very badass as villains. He does a very good job. He did a very good Joker in the Batman movies, and now he's Trickster, and he was badass in this as well. So as he hands them over, Barry explains about the parachute bombs, and James talks about how he used something similar, but is surprised when Barry says that the bombs are a match for the ones that James used, and he insists that the new Trickster is nothing like him, and says that if he knew that, he'd tell them so he could bring them in. And James dismisses the new Trickster as an amateur, and Joe asks him to help catch them, and the prisoner figures that the new Trickster found his lair and asks him to kill him when they find him. So at the police station, Iris tells Eddie that Mason has disappeared. As we know, Reverse Flash killed Mason, and Eddie doesn't find it suspicious, but Iris is sure that something has happened to him. She doesn't really know what's happened to him, though, and she asks Eddie to look into it, and Eddie says that he will as soon as they bring in the new Trickster. And by the way, guys, this whole episode honestly felt like an episode of Arrow more than it did The Flash, because The Flash is usually very funny and, sort of more like a fun show. This episode wasn't fun, and I like that tone. I like the darker tone of this episode, definitely. It worked out really well, and especially the reveals in this episode, definitely it worked really well, and I love the darker tone that they had throughout the whole episode. So, Joe and Barry go to James's old lair. They find this locked door, and Barry vibrates it open. They hear this ticking bomb, and he yanks Joe away just in time as an explosion blasts the doors open. And inside, the two men find the shelves cleaned out and realize that the Trickster took everything. And as Joe and Barry go back to see James, Barry stops at Henry's cell and explains why they're there. And he assures his father that he's close to finding Nora's murderer, and it's a really well-done scene. I definitely really love that. Those are my favorite scenes in The Flash. Just seeing Barry talk to his father, it was great to see. And they continue to James's cell, and, Henry really isn't sure if Barry should be doing this. He doesn't know too much, and he's very worried about Barry, but I love seeing that. They continue to James's cell and tell him that his lair was booby-trapped, and James is less than happy to hear that all of his equipment was stolen and demands that they find him. He says he was keeping a bomb large enough to blow Central City off the map, and Cisco calls and sends Barry a link to the Trickster's new blog, and the Trickster says that he has something much bigger planned, while James rants at the image. And back at Star Labs, Wells comments that the new Trickster likes publicity, and Barry says that not all villains hide in the dark, and Cisco's working to trace the blog's point of original, and Wells calls Barry into the next room and says that he knows what he's thinking. He figures that returning to Iron Heights has reminded him of Henry's situation, promises that they'll find Nora's killer, and you can definitely see that Wells is starting to figure out what's going on. Barry gets a text from Iris for the Flash and goes to meet with her, and then we go 15 years earlier. So this was kind of interesting, because all this time we've always thought that, Wells and Eobard Thawne were the same person, but then we see the actual Wells before he was Reverse Flash. He is on the beach with his girlfriend Tess, who they're describing how they can create a lab in the heart of the city, and Tess says that Wells reminds her of her father and suggests that they call the labs Scientific and Technical Advanced Research Laboratories, or STAR Labs, and we see how they made STAR Labs, which was great to see. I love that we finally found that out, and they kiss unaware that the young Eobard is watching them. So yes, Eobard Thawne and Harrison Wells are two different people, and I love that we found that out in this episode, because that was something I was always confused about, is how is he Eobard Thawne and Harrison Wells? Well, it's simple. They were two different people, and I thought that was an amazing reveal, but it's also really sad because you know what's going to happen to Wells, and it's really well done the way they did that. So the Flash meets Iris at Jitters, and she asks him to help find Mason, and the Flash agrees for her sake, and Iris wonders if he's upset about something, and he says that he's not sure why he wears a mask with her, just as Cisco calls to tell the Flash that the Trickster is broadcasting again, and you can see that you can understand the line, because of course there is that one timeline where Iris found out that he is the Flash, and he kind of really wants to tell her now, and it's understandable why. I mean, he showed her in that one timeline, but now that timeline's erased, so now he just really wants that to happen. He wants to be with Iris, and he wants to show her who he really is, and I really like that scene, because now we see that, yeah, he wants to show her, and he can't, though, because, of course, she doesn't know who he is in this timeline, and I thought that was really well done when we saw that. So Singe orders his men to find the bomb, and Joe assures the captain that the Flash already knows, and the Flash fails to find the bomb, and Wells realizes that the bomb isn't there. He warns that there's something else going on, but Barry ignores him and keeps searching. The hero finds the box, opens it, only to find a sign saying, "Tricked you" inside. The Trickster takes the sewer to Iron Heights and blasts open the ceiling, and at Star Labs, the scientists realize that the Trickster always planned to free James, and the Flash calls Joe, who says they have the footage, and the two tricksters took Henry as a hostage, and this is when things get pretty crazy, and that's one of the things I love about this episode, is that the metahumans actually played a huge role in this episode, wasn't just a random metahuman. No, this metahuman actually has a history and has to do with the main storyline, because it has to do with Henry, and I thought that was really well done. So at a warehouse, the trickster ties Henry up, and James says that it was one hell of a trick. He then goes to work, while the trickster says that James has been his hero. Henry warns the trickster that James is just using him, and James explains that they're keeping Henry as a hostage because his son is a police scientist. And when Henry says that the Flash will keep him, James says that that's what he's hoping for, and he's had 20 years to create the perfect trick, the trickster. And Axel Walker wonders why James chose him, and James says that it was his blood, it was in his blood, and Axel is his son, which that makes perfect sense, because why else would the trickster want to help James? And now we see why, because James was a trickster and Axel's his son. He wants to carry on the family legacy. I can totally understand that, and I thought that was really well done. We found that out. So, at Star Labs, Joe confirms that the new trickster is Alex, and he has been writing letters to James for years, and Barry admits that he should have listened to Wells and walks out. So, then we go back to the flashback, and as Wells drives Tess home, Eobard sets up a spike strip in front of the car hits it, flips over, Wells realizes that Tess is actually dead, and when Eobard walks over, Wells begs him to call someone, and Eobard says that Tess has been dead for centuries and walks away. And I thought that was really interesting when we found that out. You can see the look on Wells' face. He has no idea what's going on. And just seeing Wells so vulnerable, I loved seeing it. I thought it was really well done, and I thought they did a really good job with doing that. So Joe finds Barry in the pipeline chamber, assures him that Henry's fine, and Barry wonders how he can leave his father's fate in the hands of a man who may have murdered Nora. And he blames himself for not seeing the truth, and Joe says that Barry is always a person who wants to see the best in people, and Barry's foster father figures that they should accept his help, and Barry breaks into tears the thoughts of losing his father, and you can see that Barry really feels like an idiot. He doesn't understand how he didn't see this before, and he doesn't understand, he's, very confused what's going on with Wells, because honestly, it is confusing. I mean, if we did not know as much information about Wells as we did, then yeah, it would definitely be very confusing, and I really love that, but I like this episode shows that Barry's not an idiot. He does know what he's doing. He's just very confused as to what's going on. And now he thinks that it's going to get his father killed, and you just feel really bad for Barry, and I definitely really enjoyed that. So Iris goes to Mayor Anthony Bellows' re-election party at City Hall, showing her reporter's pass, and she's unaware that James and Axel are posing as waiters. They take the podium. Bellows comes up and asks who James is. James removes his disguise and introduces himself and says that they're there to rob them. Axel takes out a gun. James explains the champagne they serve contains poison. They'll start dying in 1 hour. One man who arrived an hour early collapses, and James tells them to call their bankers and have the money transferred. And meanwhile, Iris secretly calls Joe, and Joe gets Iris's call, and they hear James in the background, and Wells and Caitlin start working on an antidote while the Flash speeds to City Hall, and James is hitting on Iris when the Flash runs in and grabs him. And Axel slaps an explosive bracelet on the hero's wrist, and James explains it's a kinetic bomb, and if it goes below 600 miles per hour or tries to remove it, it'll explode, and the bomb activates, and the Flash runs as fast as he can, and Cisco confirms that James is telling the truth, and Wells tells him to run through a wall. He suggests he vibrate at the frequency of air, and the Flash will phase through the wall, and leaving the bomb on the other side, and the Flash says that he can't do it, but Wells tells him to focus, and the whole time I'm just thinking, Barry had a conversation early in the episode with Joe about how he doesn't understand why Wells would want to help him with his speed if he told him to just go faster. He doesn't quite understand that, and that definitely shows in this scene, because, he really doesn't know if he should be listening to him. He doesn't know if he should really trust Wells, and that really is shown very well here, and I definitely really enjoyed that. So basically, we then see that at the warehouse, Henry's rigged beneath a box, and the Flash runs in, releasing a trap, but then gets Henry out before the knives falling from the box can kill him. Barry removes his mask, and they hug, and I thought that was a really great scene. So the next day, Barry brings Henry to Star Labs, and Caitlin insists on giving him a hug. Henry asks Barry what it feels like to run at super speed, and Barry says that there's no feeling like it, and Wells assures Henry that Barry is an extraordinary man, and Henry now knows the truth about Barry, and I thought that was really great that we saw that. And I like that they didn't play as, like, a huge thing. It's not like, oh my god, he knows. No, it's just that he now knows that Barry is the Flash, and I think they're going to start doing this, like, a lot more casually. Just people start to realize that Barry's the Flash, and they keep doing it that way. I think it's actually really cool, and I'd love for them to do that, because that's really interesting. So, Wells assures Henry that Barry's an extraordinary man and promises to do everything he can to assure his future. Or make him fail, basically, because that's what Wells' plan is. And Joe takes him back to Iron Heights. Caitlin hugs Barry. Once they're alone, Barry says that he's lucky to have Wells, and they shake hands. And you can see, though, that Barry still doesn't know exactly if he should trust Wells, but he has to pretend like he does trust him, and I like that Barry is doing that. So then we go to 15 years ago, and this scene was crazy. I mean, because we were all wondering, how did Wells turn into Eobard Thawne? How did Eobard Thawne get into the body of Harrison Wells? And we see what happens here. Wells tries to climb out of the wreckage. Eobard throws him to the ground. He introduces himself, but says that what matters is who Wells is. And Eobard explains that in the year 2020, Wells and Tess successfully launched the particle accelerator. He needs Wells to do it earlier and takes out a device and then attaches it to Wells and himself, and he then transforms into Wells, and the real Wells collapses, disfigured and dead. So basically, he took over his body, and it honestly is really sad because the real Harrison Wells is dead. He had no idea this was going to happen to him, and you just feel really bad for him. And I thought that was such a well-done reveal. I love that they did that, and that was just an amazing reveal, and I loved it. So then we see that Joe calls Eddie up to the police lab and tells him that they can't let Iris investigate Mason's disappearance because they have to pretend, because she can't know the truth. She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't realize that there's a reverse Flash. They don't want her involved in all that. So it honestly is probably the best thing to do. So the Flash runs in, then unmasks, and Joe says that they need Eddie's help. And basically, Eddie comes up with the perfect lie. I thought this was a good lie what he comes up with. He tells Iris that Mason has moved to Brazil to be with a girl and live off the grid, and that's why he's left. Now, Iris is completely confused. She has no idea why he's moved to Brazil, but she listens to Eddie's story because it does seem believable. Even though she doesn't really understand what's going on, she pretty much believes his story. So their plan worked overall. So Barry and Joe arrive, and Iris goes to make supper, and Eddie isn't convinced that they're doing the right thing. He doesn't really know if they should be looking into this disappearance. He just isn't really sure. And I'd have to agree with Eddie. I mean, it might not be the best thing for them to do, but he asks how to figure out what Wells is doing. And Barry says that the way Wells told him to focus made it sound like he was talking from experience, and Barry right there figures that, holy shit, he is Reverse Flash, and Barry now knows the truth, and I love that Barry figured this out on his own. He didn't have anyone do it for him. He figured it out on his own, and that really shows how smart Barry is, because Barry's supposed to be a scientist. He's supposed to be good at what he does, and I love that. That was an amazing reveal, and I love the way they did that. Perfect way to end the episode, but that's not the way the episode ends, because the police arrive, and Wells crawls out of the wreckage, and this is back to 15 years ago, of course. He tells the cops that his name is Harrison Wells, and that's how it ends. So that is how Eobard Thawne turned into Wells, and I thought that was an amazing story, and overall, this episode was just amazing. So many things I loved about this episode. First of all, I love the way they did the metahumans. I mean, they didn't make it a silly thing. It wasn't another member of the Rogue family, which was good because I'm honestly kind of sick of them. And the thing that I love about this episode is just that it showed that Barry's not an idiot. It showed that Barry knows what he's doing. He's very experienced with this kind of thing. He will figure this out on his own. He didn't have anyone else do it for him. Even though Joe or any of them, they would have done it for him, he didn't need any of them to do it for him. He did it on his own, and that's what I love about Barry. I have always admired that about Barry, and I love that he did that. Henry finding out that Barry was the Flash, I thought was amazing to see. It's a very small moment, but it's a big moment as well, because it's his father finding out, and you're very happy for him, and I thought that was definitely really great. I love that he did that. Then also the whole thing of what's happened to Wells. Now, Barry doesn't know that whole story, so he definitely needs more that's going to happen there. But now I definitely feel like the relationship between those two is definitely going to change. Wells and Barry are going to be very different now when it comes to how the relationship is going to be. Because Barry I don't think is going to be as trusting of Wells. I think he's going to question Wells more. but he can't let Wells know that he knows what he's doing, because Wells will definitely try to kill Barry if he does do that. So who knows what's going to happen there. We'll see what happens, and I'm very interested in seeing what's actually going to happen there. As far as Iris goes, is Iris gonna believe this? I don't know. To me, it just kind of seems not believable. I mean, I can understand what they're doing, that they don't want Iris to know the truth, but it just seems kind of unbelievable to me that there would be this guy out there that, you know, Mason just moved to, you know, he just moved to Brazil to be with a girl, and she doesn't know why. I mean, there's definitely more facts that she needs, and I don't think she's going to really believe them, but that's going to be interesting to see what actually ends up happening there. There is the whole thing of Barry wanting to tell Iris that he's the Flash, and I definitely feel like that's coming in the season finale. We have a few episodes left, and the teaser, we did get like a 1-minute teaser. Now, we do have a hiatus now. We have to wait till the Flash comes back, which... I don't like that the CW is doing this. I don't like that they're doing all these hiatuses. I understand they want to spread the season out. Totally understand that. And this would be the perfect episode to go on hiatus over. But it doesn't come back till April 14th. Kind of sucks that they're doing that, because it's gotten so good. We have, how many episodes left? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 episodes left, and the next episode is All-Star Team Up, which is when Felicity and Ray Palmer come to Star Labs, and I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I'm just interested in seeing how the rest of the season's going to be now, because now that Barry knows the truth about Wells, how is this going to affect their inner relationship? That's really what I want to know. I also want to know what else happened to Eobard Thawne, how he time traveled, things like that. I want to find out more about that. I think that's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening there. And overall, guys, it's really all I have to say about this episode. Other than that, guys, this episode was amazing. As I said, it felt very different from the rest of the series, and I love that about this episode. But it's still an amazing episode. I love the flashbacks that we got. I've said before, the Flash is better when it has flashbacks, and this episode had so many flashbacks, and I love that. I love the flashbacks that it had, and I love that they weren't necessarily Barry flashbacks. These were all Harrison Wells flashbacks. These were all how Eobard Thawne became Harrison Wells, and it was amazing to see, and I absolutely love that. But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. What is going to happen now between Wells and Barry? How is their relationship going to change? Is Barry not going to be as trusting as him? I don't know, but we'll see what happens there. And I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.